Rain hammered the kingdom. Cold winds swept through empty streets. People rushed indoors before sunset because everyone knew one rule. If the beastly duke chooses you for the night, you never return.
How is she still breathing?
News spread across the kingdom. By afternoon, everyone knew the beastly duke failed to claim his victim.
My duke, she would let her go.
The duke remained silent, his eyes never leaving her. And finally, he spoke. 3 words.
Find her.
And suddenly, surviving one night became the most dangerous thing Elena had ever done.
Make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join us for the next chapter. Because trust me, what happens next changes everything. Everyone knew Elena, but nobody noticed her. Not because she was invisible, not because she hid, but because people simply stopped seeing girls like her. Every morning before sunrise, Elena woke to the sound of wooden carts rolling across cobblestone streets and merchants shouting high prices into the freezing air. While noble daughters slept beneath silk blankets, Elena carried buckets. While wealthy families enjoyed breakfast, Elena scrubbed floors. While other girls dreamed about marriage, Elena worried about whether she could afford bread tomorrow. Life had taught her something early. Poor people were useful, not important. At 19 years old, Elena worked inside a roadside inn near the kingdom's northern trade route. Travelers came. Travelers left. Nobody remembered the servant girl carrying their food, and honestly, Elena preferred it that way, because being unnoticed meant surviving. Elena, the innkeeper's voice echoed through the kitchen. She quickly turned. Yes? Table 7 needs water. She nodded. Table 3 is waiting. Another nod. Why are you standing there? Move. She moved. Because that was what she always did. Move, work, repeat. Day after day, year after year. Sometimes she wondered if this would be her entire life. Then she reminded herself. At least, many didn't. Especially near the northern territories. Especially near the Duke's land. Even saying the word Duke made people uncomfortable. Travelers lowered their voices. Merchants changed subjects. Some even crossed themselves for protection. The stories were always different. Some claimed the Duke executed servants for speaking too loudly. Others claimed nobody had ever seen him smile. Some whispered something even worse. Women entered his castle. Women never returned. Elena never believed most rumors. People enjoyed frightening themselves. Still, whenever travelers mentioned the Duke, the room always became quieter, and that always bothered her. Elena, a soft voice, interrupted her thoughts. It was Martha, an older kitchen worker. You should stop listening, Elena blinked. Listening to what? The stories. Martha lowered her voice. Some places are better left unknown. Elena forced a smile. She returned to work, but the stories stayed inside her head for weeks, until eventually life became normal again. Or at least, normal enough. Then the storm came. The day started strangely. Dark clouds covered the sky before noon. Birds disappeared. Wind pushed violently against windows. Travelers arriving at the inn complained constantly. Terrible weather. Roads will flood. We should leave early. By evening, the storm became worse. Rain attacked rooftops. Thunder shook walls. Lightning illuminated the streets. The innkeeper approached Elena. She looked up. A merchant caravan lost workers this morning, and they need extra hands. Elena frowned. Tonight, they're paying double. Double. That single word changed everything, because double pay meant food. Double pay meant rent. Double pay meant surviving another month, so Elena accepted. An hour later, she climbed into a merchant carriage. 7 strangers, wooden crates. Cold air, heavy rain. One elderly merchant smiled. Bad night for travel, Elena quietly replied. I need the money, he laughed. Fair enough. The horses moved, the journey began. Rain immediately created problems. Roads turned into mud, wheels struggled, visibility disappeared. Hours passed slowly. Nobody talked much, only thunder spoke. Then, the horses suddenly screamed. The carriage violently stopped. Everyone lurched forward. What happened? Voices filled the darkness. Then came another sound, men shouting. Outside, the driver yelled, Bandits! Panic exploded instantly. What? Open the door! Move! The carriage shook violently. Something hit wood. Another impact, then screaming. Real screaming. Elena froze. Her heartbeat became painfully loud. The elderly merchant grabbed her arm. We must run. Before she answered, The carriage door burst open. Rain flooded inside. A masked man appeared, knife in hand. Everything happened too quickly. People pushed. Someone fell. Someone screamed. Elena didn't think. She ran straight into darkness. Rain immediately blinded her. Mud pulled at her feet. Branches scratched her face. Behind her, shouting, footsteps, more screaming. She kept running. She had no idea where. Only away. Lightning flashed for a split second. She saw trees, road, shadows, then darkness again. Her lungs burned. Her legs hurt. Still, she ran. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Eventually, the shouting disappeared. Only rain remained. Elena slowed, breathing heavily, completely lost. She looked around. Nothing. No road, no lights, no people. Just forest and darkness. Fear slowly replaced adrenaline. What now? Nobody answered. Thunder shook the sky again. Then, lightning illuminated something enormous. Far ahead, tall structures, stone walls, massive towers. Elena stared. No, impossible. Another lightning flash confirmed it. A castle, not simply a castle, the one travelers whispered about. The one people feared, the Duke's castle. Even through heavy rain, it looked wrong. Too large, too silent, too dark. Most castles showed light. This one barely did. Elena swallowed. I'll leave when the storm stops. That was the plan. Simple. Find shelter. Wait. Leave. She walked toward the enormous gates. Closer. Her feet slowed because something felt strange. No guards, no voices, nothing. Only silence. She finally reached the entrance. Towering black gates stood before her. Rain poured down stone walls. She hesitated. Every rumor returned. Women disappear. Nobody returns. Monster. Beast. Death. She almost turned around, then thunder exploded overhead. She jumped, looked behind herself. Only darkness, only forest, only danger. Slowly, she raised her hand, knocked, nothing. She knocked again. Still nothing. Then, a deep sound echoed. Metal moving, chains shifting. The massive gates slowly began opening. Elena froze. Cold fear moved through her body. The opening widened. Darkness waited beyond. And for the first time that night, Elena realized something terrifying. Running from the bandits may have saved her life, but arriving here might destroy it. The gates fully opened and her nightmare began. The gates opened slowly, too slowly. The sound of grinding metal echoed through the storm like something ancient waking from sleep. Elena stood frozen. Rain poured down her face. Cold water soaked through her clothes. Yet somehow, the air inside the castle grounds felt colder. For several seconds, she simply stared. The enormous black gates continued opening. Stone walls stretched high above her. Massive towers disappeared into darkness. No music, no conversation, no signs of life, only silence. A silence so unnatural that Elena suddenly wished she had remained inside the forest. Thunder exploded overhead. She forced herself forward. One step, then another. The moment she crossed through the gates, they slammed shut behind her. Boom! Elena jumped. Her heart nearly stopped. She turned immediately. The gates were closed again, locked. For some reason that frightened her more than the storm. Large shadows moved ahead. Men. Guards, 6 of them, wearing dark armor, each carrying swords. They stared. Not normal staring, not curiosity, not confusion, fear. One guard moved forward. His eyes widened. A woman? Another guard quickly approached. What is she doing here? I don't know. Who allowed this? Rain continued falling. Elena nervously spoke. I got lost. Nobody answered, she continued. Bandits attacked our carriage, still silent. She pointed toward the forest. I only need shelter until morning. The guards exchanged nervous looks. One older guard whispered, she cannot stay. Another immediately agreed. No, absolutely not. Elena blinked. I'll sleep anywhere. No. The stables? No. The entrance hall? The guard's face became pale. No. Elena frowned. Why were they acting like this? She looked around again. The castle was enormous. Hundreds of rooms probably existed. Yet 6 armed guards suddenly looked terrified because of one servant girl asking for shelter. Then she noticed something strange. None of them looked at her for long. Their eyes repeatedly shifted somewhere behind her, as if checking whether something was approaching. Then, footsteps echoed. Everything changed instantly. The guards straightened. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the storm suddenly felt quieter. Ian slowly turned. A figure walked through the darkness. Tall, broad shoulders. Long black coat moving with the wind. His footsteps were slow, controlled, confident. He stopped several feet away. Elena stared. So this was him. The Duke, the man people called a monster. He looked younger than she expected. Not old, not fragile, not weak. Dangerous. That was the first word that entered her mind. Dangerous. His face remained partially hidden beneath shadows created by flickering lanterns. But she noticed enough: sharp features, cold eyes, expressionless, completely expressionless. Rain landed on him. He didn't react. Wind moved around him. He didn't react. The guards lowered their heads immediately. My Duke. Nobody introduced Elena. Nobody explained. The Duke simply looked at her and kept looking. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, too long. Elena suddenly became aware of everything. Her wet hair, mud on her clothes, her shaking hands, the fact she probably looked ridiculous. Still, the Duke continued staring. Something inside his expression changed. Not much, just slightly, as if he had seen something unexpected. One guard finally spoke. My Duke! The man's voice shook. She appeared at the gate. Another guard added, We told her she cannot remain. The Duke remained silent. Still watching Elena, she forced herself to speak. I apologize. His eyes moved slightly. She continued. I only need shelter from the storm. Nothing. I'll leave at sunrise. Still silence. Elena suddenly wished he would blink, because somehow the way he stared felt worse. The older guard carefully said, My Duke, perhaps we should send her elsewhere. The Duke slowly looked toward the guard. That single movement changed everything. The guard immediately stopped talking. Elena noticed it instantly. These men weren't simply respecting him. They feared him deeply. Then finally, the Duke spoke. His voice was calm, almost quiet. One night. That was all. 2 words. Nothing more. The guards immediately obeyed. No arguments, no questions, no hesitation. Yes, my Duke. Elena blinked. That was it? She could stay? One guard stepped forward. This way. Elena looked once more toward the Duke. He had already turned away, walking back into darkness. No explanation. No questions. Nothing. She followed the guards. The deeper they entered the castle, the stranger everything became. The entrance hall was enormous. Tall ceilings, massive staircases, golden decorations, expensive paintings, luxury everywhere. Yet something felt wrong. Empty. Too empty. No servants running, no laughter, no music. Large castles usually felt alive. This place felt abandoned. One guard noticed her looking. Keep walking. She quickly obeyed. They passed long corridors. Every footstep echoed. Every door remained closed. Finally, they stopped before a room. A small guest chamber. One guard opened the door. You stay here, Elena quietly asked. Thank you. Nobody responded. She hesitated, then asked, Does the Duke always allow strangers inside? The guards exchanged uncomfortable looks. One quietly answered, No. Another whispered, Never. Elena felt uneasy. Before she asked more, the older guard suddenly grabbed her wrist. Not painfully, but firmly. His expression looked serious. Very serious. Listen carefully. Elena nodded. The man lowered his voice. Do not leave this room, she frowned. Why? The guard hesitated. Then answered, Because this castle becomes different at night. A younger guard immediately interrupted. Stop! The older man released Elena. Everyone suddenly looked nervous again. The first guard quickly spoke. Lock your door. Another added. And whatever you hear. Elena looked confused. Here! The guard avoided eye contact. Ignore it. They immediately turned. Walking away quickly, too quickly. Elena stood alone, confused, wet, exhausted. She entered the room. The door closed behind her. For the first time since escaping the bandits, silence returned. The room itself looked beautiful. Large bed, fireplace, soft carpets. Expensive furniture, far nicer than anything Elena had experienced. Yet she couldn't relax, because something felt wrong. Very wrong. She approached the window. Outside, rain continued attacking the castle walls. Lightning illuminated towers. Darkness surrounded everything. Then she noticed movement below, the Duke, standing alone, motionless, in the rain, not moving, not seeking shelter, simply standing there. Watching the storm, Elena stared. Why? The Duke slowly lifted his head. Their eyes met. Even from this distance, a strange feeling moved through her. Not fear, not exactly. Something else. Something she couldn't explain. Then suddenly, disappearing into darkness, Elena stepped backward, locked the door, sat on the bed, and finally realized something terrifying. Surviving the bandits had not ended her nightmare. It may have only moved her somewhere worse, because tonight she would sleep inside the castle everyone feared, inside the home of the beastly Duke, and somehow that frightened her more than anything waiting outside. The castle never truly slept. Elena realized that quickly, because even after locking her door, even after placing a chair beneath the handle, even after wrapping herself tightly inside thick blankets, she still couldn't relax. The silence was wrong, too heavy, too unnatural. Outside her small window, rain continued falling, wind pushed against stone walls. Occasionally thunder shook the castle, but inside, nothing. No servants talking, no footsteps, no laughter, nothing. Elena sat upright on the edge of the bed, watching the fireplace, listening, waiting. Her mind replayed everything. The terrified guards, the strange warnings, the Duke staring at her. That sentence repeated inside her head. One night. Why only one night? Why had everyone reacted like she was already dead? She forced herself onto the bed, closed her eyes. Opened them again seconds later. Sleep refused to come. Eventually, she stood, walked around the room, touched expensive furniture, examined paintings, anything to avoid thinking. Then, a soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Elena froze. Another knock, very quiet. She slowly approached the door. Who is it? She hesitated, then carefully opened it slightly. An elderly woman stood outside, wearing servant clothing, gray hair, nervous eyes. The woman quickly entered, then shut the door behind herself. Elena blinked. Oh! The woman raised a finger. Quiet. Elena immediately obeyed. The servant looked around the room, almost checking whether someone followed her. Finally, she exhaled. I brought food. Elena suddenly noticed the tray. Bread, soup, tea. She smiled slightly. Thank you. The servant quietly placed everything down. Her hands shook. Elena noticed. Are you all right? The woman looked toward the door again, then quietly asked, You're staying tonight? Yes. The servant became pale, very pale. Elena frowned. What happened? The woman whispered. You should not be here. Elena sighed. I've heard that already. No. The servant moved closer. You do not understand. Elena looked confused. The older woman lowered her voice further. No woman survives here. Silence. Elena stared. What? The servant quickly continued. Leave before midnight. Elena blinked. Leave where? Anywhere. The woman looked terrified. Forest Road. I don't care. Elena slowly shook her head. There are bandits outside. The servant looked down, then quietly answered, Sometimes outside is safer. Elena felt cold. What happens here? The woman opened her mouth, then suddenly stopped. Her eyes widened. Footsteps. Far away. Approaching. The servant immediately panicked. I said nothing. She rushed toward the door. Before leaving, she turned, looked directly at Elena, then whispered, Lock the door, and disappeared. Elena quickly closed it again. Her heartbeat increased. No woman survives here. What did that even mean? Did people disappear? Were they killed? Was the Duke dangerous? Her eyes moved toward the food. She suddenly wasn't hungry. Hours passed slowly. Painfully slowly. The storm weakened. The castle became even quieter. Eventually, the fireplace weakened. Only orange embers remained. Elena sat against the wall, trying to stay awake because sleeping suddenly felt dangerous. Nothing happened. Minutes passed, still nothing. She laughed nervously. Maybe everyone exaggerated. Maybe rumors simply became stories. Maybe creak. Elena immediately froze. A door opening. Not hers, somewhere outside. Then footsteps, slow footsteps, walking through the corridor. Her heartbeat accelerated. She quietly approached her door, pressed her ear against wood. The footsteps continued, not servant footsteps, too controlled, too steady. Curiosity appeared. She hated curiosity, but it appeared anyway. The footsteps moved farther away. Elena slowly unlocked her door, just slightly. The corridor looked empty, only candlelight, silence. Then movement, far ahead. A tall figure walking away the Duke. Elena immediately recognized him. Long dark coat, straight posture, slow footsteps. He walked alone at midnight. Why? She should close the door. Return inside, sleep. Instead, she stepped into the corridor, quietly, very quietly, following. The Duke never looked back. He moved through endless corridors, past expensive paintings, past statues, past locked rooms. Elena remained far behind. Every few moments she nearly stopped. Then curiosity pulled her forward again. The castle looked different at night. Longer, darker, almost alive. Eventually, the Duke reached a staircase Elena had not seen before. Hidden behind decorative walls, he descended. Elena waited, counted slowly, then followed. The lower levels felt colder. Dust-covered walls, fewer candles, more shadows. Why would a Duke come here? The Duke continued moving. Left, right, down another hallway. Finally, he stopped. Elena immediately hid behind a stone pillar, carefully peeking. The Duke stood before a large wooden door, different from everything else. No decorations, no markings, just old wood. He removed something from his pocket, a key, unlocked it, entered. The door closed, silence. Elena remained hidden, her heart pounded. She should leave immediately. This clearly wasn't normal. Yet, she walked forward, slowly. Toward the door, she reached it. Placed her hand against wood. Nothing, no sounds, no voices. She looked behind herself. Nobody. Slowly, she pushed. The door moved, unlocked. Her eyes widened. He forgot to lock it? The opening widened, darkness waited inside. Elena stepped forward, then stopped completely. Her breathing disappeared. The room was enormous. Candlelight filled the space, walls covered entirely. Not with books, not weapons, portraits. Dozens, maybe more, women. Portrait after portrait after portrait, every wall, every corner, women everywhere. Elena stared, confused, terrified. Because they looked familiar, too familiar. She approached one portrait, young woman, dark hair, similar eyes. Another portrait, same. Another, same. Another. Her hands started shaking, because slowly she realized something impossible. They looked like her. Not exactly, but close enough. Far too close. Her face, her features, her eyes, again, dozens of times, Elena whispered. What? Then she noticed something worse. Dates. Each portrait had dates, years apart, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, different ages, different names, yet the same face. Her face. A cold feeling moved through her body. She kept walking. More portraits, more women, some smiling, some serious, some wearing noble clothing, some simple dresses. Then one portrait stopped her completely. Because this woman looked almost identical. Not similar, not close, identical. Elena slowly moved closer, beneath the painting. Words were written, beloved sister. Elena froze. Sister? Whose sister? She already knew. Very slowly, she turned around. The Duke stood behind her, silent, expressionless, watching. He said nothing. Elena could barely breathe. Because suddenly, she understood something terrifying. This wasn't simply a secret room. This wasn't simply strange behavior. The Duke knew exactly who she looked like, and perhaps that was why she survived. The Duke finally spoke, quietly. You were not supposed to see this. And suddenly, Elena wished she had never followed him at all. Elena did not remember returning to her room. One moment. She stood inside the hidden chamber, surrounded by portraits, staring at faces that looked almost identical to hers. The next, she somehow sat on the edge of her bed again, breathing heavily, hands shaking, unable to understand what had happened. The Duke's final words repeated endlessly inside her mind. You were not supposed to see this. That was all he said. Nothing more. No anger, no threats, no explanation. He simply escorted her back through the dark corridors, silent, cold, unreadable, then left as if nothing had happened. Elena looked toward the window. Darkness still covered the castle grounds. She had no idea how much time remained before morning. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw portraits, dozens of them, women. Faces, eyes, her face again. She stood, walked, sat, stood again. Her mind searched desperately for answers. Who were those women? Why did they resemble her? Who was the woman labeled beloved sister? More importantly, why had the Duke looked at her like that? Not with anger, not with hatred. Something else, something worse, recognition. Hours passed painfully. Eventually, gray light appeared outside. Morning. Elena immediately stood. Good. Morning meant leaving. Leaving meant safety. Leaving meant forgetting this castle forever. She quickly gathered herself, adjusted her clothing, opened the room door, and immediately stopped. Someone waited outside, a guard. The same older guard from yesterday. His expression looked exhausted, almost relieved. You survived. Elena blinked. What? The man quickly looked away. Nothing, she frowned. I want to leave. The guard nodded immediately. Of course. He hesitated, then quietly added, My Duke requested something. Elena suddenly felt nervous. What? The guard swallowed. Requested to escort you personally. Silence. Elena stared. Personally, why? The guard avoided eye contact, as if even speaking about it made him uncomfortable. Elena quietly asked, Does he normally do that? The guard immediately answered, No. That response somehow made things worse. She followed the guard. The castle looked different during daylight, less terrifying, yet somehow more strange, because now she could truly see how empty everything was. Massive halls, expensive decorations, beautiful paintings, very few people. Servants moved quietly, too quietly. Nobody laughed, nobody talked. Whenever Elena passed, people stared. Not normal staring, confused staring, shocked staring. One servant accidentally dropped a tray while looking at her. Another nearly walked into a wall. Elena became uncomfortable. Why was everyone looking at her like that? Then she realized because she was leaving. Alive. The older guard suddenly stopped walking. We're here. Elena looked ahead. The main entrance, large doors, sunlight, freedom, and standing there. The Duke, he stood exactly as before, tall, motionless, expressionless, wearing dark clothing despite bright morning. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the guard immediately stepped away, leaving them alone. Elena suddenly wished he had stayed. The Duke turned toward the exit. Without speaking, then began walking. Elena quietly followed. Neither spoke. Their footsteps echoed through the entrance hall. Then outside, cold morning air touched Elena's face. The storm had disappeared. Everything looked peaceful, too peaceful. Birds sang, sunlight covered the grounds. It almost felt impossible that the terrifying night truly happened. They continued walking, still silent. Elena occasionally looked toward him, trying to understand. Why escort her personally? Why allow her to leave? Why not ask questions about the secret room? The silence became uncomfortable, so she finally spoke. "Thank you." The Duke didn't respond. She continued, "For letting me stay." Still silence. They kept walking toward the massive gates. Closer, closer. Freedom! Elena quietly smiled. Maybe this really was over. Maybe she could simply leave. Forget everything. Return to normal life. Pretend none of this happened. They finally reached the gates. The guards immediately opened them. Elena prepared to step through. Then the Duke spoke. "What is your name?" She froze, slowly turned. For some reason, that question surprised her more than everything else. He allowed her inside, protected her, escorted her personally, yet never asked her name. Until now, she quietly answered, "Elena." Silence. The Duke looked at her, longer than necessary, then repeated it quietly. "Elena." Something changed slightly in his expression, very slightly, almost invisible. But Elena noticed pain, not much, just enough. As if hearing that name hurt, he looked away. Almost immediately, Elena felt confused. "Is something wrong?" The Duke remained silent. The gates remained open. Finally, he spoke. "You may leave." That was all. Elena nodded slowly, then stepped beyond the gates. One step, then another. She expected relief. Instead, she felt strange. She turned once. The Duke still stood there, watching, expressionless. Elena quickly looked away, then continued walking down the long road leading away from the castle. Every step made her feel lighter. Eventually, the castle became smaller behind her. Good. She wanted distance, lots of distance. Hours later, she finally reached familiar roads. Familiar shops, familiar people, normal life. She smiled slightly. Finally, back home. Yet something felt different. People stared, more than usual. At first, she ignored it. Then she overheard whispers. "Is that her? Impossible." Elena frowned. News spread already? How? She continued walking faster, finally reaching the inn. The moment she entered, everything stopped. Workers froze. Customers stared. Even the innkeeper looked shocked. Martha immediately rushed forward, her eyes wide. "Elena!" She grabbed her shoulders. "You're alive!" Elena blinked. "Yes!" Martha looked confused. "You don't know? Know what?" The older woman lowered her voice. "People said you entered the Duke's castle." Elena slowly nodded. Martha whispered, "Nobody comes back." Silence. Elena forced herself to laugh. Clearly that's not true. But nobody laughed with her, because everyone still looked terrified. That night, Elena tried returning to normal. Cleaning, working, serving food. Yet something changed everywhere she looked. People watched. Customers whispered. Workers stared. She accidentally looked outside. A black carriage sat across the street, motionless, watching. Her stomach tightened. Later, she carried water outside. Two unfamiliar men immediately stopped talking when they saw her. Watching again, Elena became uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Back at the castle, the Duke remained standing at the gate. Long after Elena disappeared, the older guard carefully approached. "My Duke!" Silence. The guard hesitated. "Should we close the gates?" The Duke finally looked away from the road. His voice remained calm. Too calm. "Find everything about her." The guard froze. "My Duke?" The Duke repeated, "Everything." The guard lowered his head. "Yes." As soldiers immediately moved, the older guard quietly asked himself something nobody dared say aloud. Why? Because during all his years serving the Duke, he had never seen this before. Never. Not once. And for the first time, the older guard became afraid. Not for the Duke. Not for the castle. For Elena. Because surviving one night inside the beastly Duke's castle may have been the beginning of something much worse. 3 days passed, then 4, then 7. Life should have returned to normal. It didn't. At first, Elena convinced herself she imagined everything. The portraits, the hidden room, the strange look in the Duke's eyes. People experienced frightening nights. Then life moved forward. That was what she told herself. Unfortunately, life disagreed. The first strange thing happened the morning after returning. Elena opened the small door of her room above the inn and found flowers, fresh flowers, white roses, beautiful, expensive. She looked around. Nobody. The hallway remained empty. She picked them up slowly. Confused, there was no note, no explanation. Martha noticed immediately. "Who gave those to you?" Elena shrugged. I don't know. Martha frowned. Those cost money and placed them inside water, trying not to think about it. The second strange thing happened 2 days later. Coins, small silver coins, placed neatly outside her door. She stared. Counted. Enough money to pay rent, enough money to buy food, enough money to survive comfortably. Her stomach tightened. Someone was watching. Someone knew where she lived, she asked everyone. Nobody knew anything. The innkeeper laughed. Maybe somebody likes you. Elena forced a smile. But something felt wrong, very wrong. Then came the third thing, protection. Although she didn't realize it immediately. It started with small moments. Walking home late, she noticed unfamiliar men nearby, standing, watching streets, then disappearing. One evening, 2 drunk men followed her, laughing, making uncomfortable comments. Elena walked faster. Their footsteps increased. Then suddenly, 3 armored men appeared from nowhere. The drunks immediately ran. The guards disappeared seconds later. Elena stopped walking, confused. Where did they come from? Another day, a wagon nearly struck her while turning sharply. Before impact, someone pulled her backward. A guard, unknown. The moment she looked properly, he had already disappeared. Again. The pattern continued everywhere, always watching, protecting. Elena eventually realized something. She never saw the same faces twice. That frightened her. Because organized protection required organization. Organization required power. Only one person had enough power. The Duke. No. She shook her head. Impossible. Why would a Duke care? Days passed, her discomfort increased. Then came the watching. At first, small things. People looking too long. Unknown faces appearing repeatedly. Black carriages parked nearby. Strangers stopping conversations when she approached. One afternoon, Elena accidentally turned around quickly and caught someone staring. A man, well-dressed. The moment their eyes met, he walked away. Too quickly, she followed, only briefly. The man disappeared, her heartbeat increased. That night, she barely slept. The next morning, she finally told Martha. I think somebody is following me. Martha looked serious. Who? Elena hesitated, then quietly answered. I think the Duke. Silence. Martha slowly placed down the dishes she carried. The Duke? Elena nodded. Martha immediately looked toward the windows, checking outside, then lowered her voice. Never say that loudly. Elena frowned. Why? Martha looked uncomfortable. Because if powerful people want to watch you, she paused. You usually don't notice. Elena felt worse. Much worse. A week later, everything changed. It happened during lunch. The streets were busy. Merchants shouting, children running, customers entering the inn. Normal. Very normal. Then, silence. Not complete silence, but close. Elena noticed it immediately. Conversations stopped. People turned. Looking toward the road, she followed their eyes. A royal carriage, black, large, expensive, pulled by powerful horses. Her stomach dropped instantly. No, not here. The carriage stopped directly outside the inn. Nobody moved. Even merchants stopped working. Slowly, the carriage door opened. The Duke stepped out. Entire streets became silent. Elena suddenly forgot how breathing worked. Why was he here? Why publicly? Why now? The Duke looked exactly the same. Cold, expressionless, dangerous, yet something felt different. This time, he wasn't surrounded by castle walls. Now he stood in her world, and somehow that felt worse. The innkeeper nearly tripped, rushing outside. My Duke! People immediately lowered their heads. Nobody looked directly at him, except Elena, because she couldn't move. The Duke looked at her immediately. Of course he did, as if she were the only person present. Then he walked toward her. One step, then another. The entire street watched. Elena wanted to disappear. Instead, she remained frozen. The Duke stopped before her, close enough that she noticed details. His eyes looked tired, more tired than before. His expression remained unreadable. Neither spoke. Several painful seconds passed. Finally, the Duke asked one question. Why are you still alive? Silence. Elena blinked. What? People around them looked confused. The Duke repeated, Why are you alive? Elena stared. Her mind stopped working. What does that mean? The Duke looked at her quietly, then answered, Nobody survives that night. The street became even quieter. Elena felt cold. You keep saying that. The Duke remained silent, she continued. What night? The storm? The castle? The room? Still silence. Frustration replaced fear. You allowed me inside, then let me leave. So what are you talking about? The Duke looked away briefly, then back toward her. His voice lowered, almost quietly. You should not exist. Elena froze. People nearby exchanged nervous looks, she whispered. What? The Duke stared at her, not angry, not cruel, confused. as if he genuinely didn't understand. He quietly asked, "When you left?" She waited. "Did anything happen?" Elena frowned. "What do you mean?" The Duke looked toward her carefully, almost studying, then simply said, "Nothing." Silence again. Elena became frustrated. "You came here for this?" The Duke ignored the question. Instead, he looked toward the inn, toward the street, toward the people watching, then back toward her. He quietly said, "You should move." Elena blinked. "What? This place isn't safe." Her confusion increased. "Because of who?" The Duke answered immediately. "Because of me." Everything stopped. Even Elena couldn't respond. The Duke looked at her for several seconds, then turned, walking back toward the carriage. Elena finally found her voice. "Wait!" He stopped. She swallowed, then asked, "Why are you doing this?" The Duke remained still for several seconds. Finally, he answered without turning around, "I don't know," then entered the carriage. Moments later, it disappeared. The street remained silent. Nobody moved. Then suddenly, everyone started whispering. Customers, workers, merchants. Everybody. Martha rushed toward Elena. "What was that?" Elena slowly shook her head. "I don't know." But she did know one thing. Something had changed. Because when she looked around, people no longer stared at her with curiosity. Now, they looked afraid. That night, Elena returned to her room, opened the door, and immediately froze. More flowers, much more, the entire room filled with white roses. At the center, a small note, only 4 words. "Stay where guards exist." Elena slowly looked toward the window. Outside, across the street, a shadow stood watching, then disappeared. For the first time, Elena asked herself a terrifying question. Was the Duke obsessed with protecting her, or was she simply becoming his prisoner? Elena stopped sleeping properly, not because of nightmares, because reality had become worse. Every morning, flowers. Every evening, shadows watching. Every time she walked home, unknown guards nearby. The Duke never returned personally, yet somehow he felt everywhere. Days passed. The entire town changed around her. People whispered when she walked by. Customers stared longer. Children pointed. Even merchants lowered their voices. Because everyone now knew something impossible. The servant girl from the inn, the poor nobody, had somehow survived the beastly Duke. Elena hated the attention. She hated the whispers. Most of all, she hated not understanding. Because the Duke's words repeated constantly. "Nobody survives that night. You should not exist. This place isn't safe." What did any of it mean? One evening, Elena finally made a decision. She needed answers, real answers, not rumors, not whispers answers. And there was only one place to start, the castle. Not inside it, never again, but near it. Because if anyone knew the truth, it would be the servants. The next morning, Elena borrowed an old cloak, covered her hair, then traveled north. Toward the massive black castle she promised herself never to revisit. Clouds covered the sky again, not storm clouds. Just enough darkness to make the castle look exactly as terrifying as before. Even standing outside the outer village made Elena uncomfortable. People here behaved differently, quieter, careful, like everyone constantly feared saying the wrong thing. Elena entered a small market, bought bread she didn't need, then casually asked, "Do castle servants shop here?" The merchant immediately looked nervous. "Sometimes." Elena nodded, then waited. Hours passed. Finally, she saw her. The elderly servant, the woman who warned her, the same woman who whispered, "No woman survives here." The older woman carried baskets, walking slowly. Elena quickly followed. "Wait," the servant turned, immediately froze. "You!" Elena smiled nervously. "We need to talk." The older woman looked terrified. "No, please, no." Elena moved closer. "I need answers." The servant shook her head repeatedly. "You should leave." "Why?" "Because returning here is dangerous." Elena quietly answered. "So is knowing nothing." Silence. The servant stared, then sighed. "Not here." They walked far from the market, far from castle walls. Eventually reaching a small abandoned bench beside old trees, the servant finally spoke. "Why did you return?" Elena answered honestly. "Because none of this makes sense." The older woman remained silent. Elena continued. "The portraits." The servant immediately became pale. "The hidden room. Worse, the women." The servant whispered. "You saw them." Elena nodded slowly. Several painful seconds passed. Finally, the older woman sat, looking exhausted. "You should not have seen that room." "I know." The servant looked toward the castle, then quietly asked, "Did you see the portrait?" Elena hesitated. "Which one?" The older woman answered, "The girl labeled sister." Elena slowly nodded. The servant closed her eyes, then was whispered, "That is where everything began." Elena sat beside her, listening carefully. The older woman finally spoke. "Years ago, She paused. The castle was different. Elena remained quiet. The servant continued. There was laughter, music, people. The Duke was different too, Elena frowned. Different how? The servant looked distant. He smiled. That answer surprised Elena, because imagining the Duke smiling felt impossible. The servant continued. The Duke had family, his parents, and a younger sister. What was her name? The servant hesitated, then quietly answered, Rosalie. The name felt strangely familiar. Although Elena didn't know why, the servant continued. Everyone loved her. Servants, guards, everyone. Elena quietly asked, what happened? The older woman looked toward the castle again, then whispered, she disappeared. Silence. Disappeared? The servant nodded. One day she existed. The next day she didn't. Elena frowned. Was she kidnapped? We don't know. Did she run away? We don't know. Did she die? The servant slowly answered. We don't know. Cold air moved through the trees. The servant continued. Then everything became worse. Months later, the Duke's family was murdered. Elena froze. Murdered? The servant nodded. His mother, his father, almost everyone. Only the Duke survived. Elena felt cold. The older woman looked down. When he returned, he was different. How? The servant answered immediately. Empty. Silence, then she quietly continued, and afterward, Elena waited. The servant lowered her voice. Women started arriving. Elena's heartbeat increased. What women? The servant answered. Women who looked familiar. Elena froze. They entered the castle, some willingly, some invited, some paid, some desperate. The servant slowly looked at Elena. None returned. Silence. Elena's breathing changed. What happened to them? The servant shook her head. We don't know. Nobody knows. Elena immediately stood. Fear moved through her body. Then why did I survive? The servant stared, then quietly answered, that is exactly why everyone is afraid. Elena couldn't speak. The servant slowly continued. You look too similar. To who? The servant whispered. Rosalie. Everything became quiet. Elena remembered the portrait, the identical face, the label, sister. Suddenly, something terrible entered her mind, her necklace. Her hand immediately moved beneath her clothing, touching it, always there, always hidden. She had worn it since childhood. Her adoptive mother once said, never remove this. Elena suddenly pulled it out. The servant noticed immediately. Her eyes widened. What is that? Elena stared at the necklace. Small silver metal, old worn. She slowly opened it. Inside a symbol, the same strange symbol, the exact symbol. The one painted beside every portrait. The servant immediately stood, nearly stumbling backward. No! Elena looked confused. What? The older woman's face lost color. Where did you get that? I've always had it. The servant shook her head repeatedly. No. My mother gave it to me. No. Elena frowned. What is wrong? The servant whispered. That symbol. Elena waited. The servant looked terrified. That symbol belonged to the Duke's family. Silence. Everything stopped. Elena stared. What? The older woman pointed toward the necklace. Only family members wore those. Elena slowly stepped backward. No. The servant whispered. How do you have that? Elena looked down at the necklace, hands shaking, because suddenly questions became much worse. The portraits, the identical faces, the Duke's reaction, the hidden room, the obsession, the protection, her necklace, everything connected. And for the first time, Elena became afraid of something worse than the Duke. The possibility that she was connected to him, far more than either of them realized. After discovering the truth about the necklace, Elena stopped feeling safe. Not because of the Duke. Not anymore. Now, she feared everyone else. The old servant's words repeated constantly. That symbol belonged to the Duke's family. Impossible. It had to be impossible. Elena stared at the necklace every night, opened it, closed it, opened it again, searching for answers hidden inside cold silver. Nothing changed. The symbol remained. The same symbol from the portraits. The same symbol from the hidden room. The same symbol connected to the Duke's lost sister. She finally asked herself the question she avoided. Who am I? Days passed. The Duke never appeared. The flowers stopped. The notes disappeared. Even the hidden guards became less visible. At first, Elena felt relieved. Then she noticed something worse. The watching continued. More carefully now, more quietly. People following at greater distances, unknown faces, expensive clothing, noble clothing. One afternoon, while delivering food outside the inn, she noticed two well-dressed men standing across the street, watching, not pretending, watching openly. The moment Elena looked directly at them, they immediately turned away. Her stomach tightened. Later that evening, she asked Martha, "Do nobles come here often?" Martha laughed. "No," Elena pointed outside. What about them? Martha looked, immediately became uncomfortable. They've been here 3 days. What? I thought you knew. Fear slowly returned. That night, Elena could not sleep. She finally opened the necklace again. Moonlight reflected against silver. The symbol stared back. She whispered quietly, "What are you?" Nobody answered, but somewhere else, someone already knew. Inside a massive noble estate, several powerful men sat around a long table. Nobody smiled, nobody relaxed, because papers covered the table, sketches, descriptions, witness reports. One elderly noble finally spoke. "So, silence. She survived." Another man answered quietly, "Yes." A third whispered, "Impossible." The oldest noble slowly placed down a document. "It becomes worse," everyone looked. The paper showed a drawing, Elena, and around her neck, the symbol. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, one noble whispered, "If she discovers the truth," another finished. Everything collapses. Silence. Then came the question nobody wanted. "What do we do?" The oldest noble answered immediately, "Remove the problem." The next morning, Elena woke hungry, very hungry. She went downstairs. The inn remained busy. Normal. She liked normal. Martha smiled. "I saved breakfast." Elena sat. Bread, tea, warm soup. Normal. She picked up the spoon, then paused. Something smelled strange, very faint. Almost impossible to notice. Elena frowned. Martha noticed. "What?" Elena looked at the soup. "I don't know." Martha leaned closer. Her expression changed instantly. "Don't eat that." Elena looked confused. "What?" Martha grabbed the bowl, smelled again, then quietly whispered, "Stay here." She disappeared. Minutes later, she returned pale, very pale. "Who brought this?" The kitchen workers exchanged looks. Nobody knew. Nobody remembered. Elena suddenly felt cold. Martha quietly asked, "Did anyone see who placed this?" Silence. Nobody answered, because nobody noticed. Someone poisoned her food inside the inn. During daylight, Elena barely touched the bowl, yet her hand still shook. Someone wanted her dead. The question wasn't who. The question was, 3 nights later, things became worse. Elena woke coughing, smoke everywhere. Her eyes opened immediately. Fire, orange light-covered walls, people screaming below. The inn was burning. Elena rushed toward the door, opened it. Smoke filled the hallway. People ran, shouted, panicked. She moved toward stairs. A loud crash stopped her. The staircase collapsed. Fire surrounded everything. Her heartbeat exploded. No, heat increased. Windows. She needed windows. Elena ran, reached her room again. Opened the window. Too high. Far too high. Smoke filled her lungs. She coughed violently. Then, glass shattered. Someone entered. A man. Black clothing, face covered. Not a firefighter, not helping. He grabbed her arm violently. "Come." Elena struggled. "Who are you?" The masked man ignored her. Then, something moved behind him. Fast, a blade. The masked man suddenly stopped moving. Completely. His eyes widened. Then he collapsed. Elena stared, standing behind him. The Duke, smoke surrounded him. His expression looked colder than usual. Much colder. He grabbed Elena immediately. "Move!" She couldn't even speak. They escaped through smoke-filled corridors. Outside, rain had started again. People screamed. Water everywhere. Elena looked at the burning inn. "My room," the Duke interrupted. "You nearly died." She looked at him. "What are you doing here?" The Duke answered simply. "You were watched." Her confusion increased. Before asking more, the Duke suddenly looked behind them. His expression changed. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Several masked figures appeared. "Too many," the Duke quietly spoke. "Stay behind me." Elena froze. The masked men rushed forward. Everything happened quickly. Too quickly. Elena had never seen violence before. Not real violence. Now she did. The Duke moved like someone completely different. Cold. Precise. Terrifying. The masked men clearly expected resistance. Not this. Within moments, several lay motionless. The survivors immediately attempted escape. The Duke grabbed one, pulled him forward. "Who sent you?" Silence. The masked man refused. The Duke's voice became quieter. That somehow felt worse. "Who?" The man finally whispered something. A family name. Elena didn't recognize it. The Duke did, because his expression changed immediately. Not shock. Recognition. He released the man, then quietly ordered guards, "Keep him alive." Hours later, news spread everywhere. Poison, fire. Masked attackers. Everyone talked. Nobody understood. Elena sat inside temporary guest rooms provided by town officials. Still shaking. The Duke stood near the window, silent. Finally asked, "Why?" The Duke looked at her. "They know." "What?" "That you exist." Elena frowned. "Who?" The Duke answered. "The people who should fear you." Silence. "What truth?" The Duke looked away, then quietly answered. "The truth they buried." Elena felt confused, terrified, angry. "What truth?" The Duke remained silent, then suddenly a guard entered. My Duke! The Duke turned. What? Another noble family requests explanation. Silence. The Duke slowly stood, then looked toward Elena. His expression changed, not softer, just more dangerous. He quietly said, Tell them something. The guard waited. The Duke's voice became ice. Touch her again. Silence. And I destroy your bloodline. The guard swallowed, immediately leaving. Elena stared. Because for the first time, she realized something terrifying. The beastly Duke wasn't simply protecting her anymore. He was preparing for war. And somehow, she had become the center of it. After the fire, nothing returned to normal. Not for Elena, not for the town, not for anyone. The burned remains of the inn still stood, black wood, broken walls, ash everywhere. People walked around it quietly, because everyone knew. The fire wasn't an accident, and everybody knew something else too. The Duke had carried Elena out himself. That single detail changed everything. Now, people didn't simply stare anymore, they moved away, because being close to Elena suddenly felt dangerous, very dangerous. 3 days after the attack, Elena sat inside temporary rooms provided by town officials, small, cold, unfamiliar, sleep rarely came. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flames, masked men, the Duke fighting, the necklace, the portraits. Questions multiplied faster than answers. She finally reached a point where fear became something else. Frustration, because everyone kept speaking in pieces. Nobody explained anything. Not the servants, not the guards, not the Duke, especially not the Duke. A knock interrupted her thoughts. She immediately stood, nervous. Who is it? A familiar voice answered. Open! Her heartbeat increased. The Duke. She hesitated, then opened the door. He stood there, alone, no guards. No carriage, just him. Elena stared. What are you doing here? The Duke answered simply. Checking. Checking what? You. Silence. Elena stepped aside. He entered. The room suddenly felt smaller, much smaller. The Duke looked around once, then stood quietly, as usual. Neither spoke. Finally, Elena broke first. Stop! The Duke looked at her, she continued. No more strange answers, no more secrets. No more disappearing. Silence. Elena stepped closer. You appear everywhere. You protect me. People try killing me. You know things. Her voice became stronger, and I don't understand any of it. The Duke remained silent. That frustrated her even more. She pointed directly at him. Why me? Nothing. Why are nobles attacking me? Nothing. Why are you watching me? Still nothing. Elena finally asked the question she wanted most. Why do I look like those women? The Duke looked away. That tiny movement, that single movement, told Elena enough. He knew. Of course he knew. She moved closer. Tell me. The Duke remained quiet, then slowly walked toward the window. Looking outside, his voice finally appeared. You should hate me, Elena blinked. What? He repeated quietly. You should. Confusion replaced anger. What does that mean? The Duke slowly removed one glove. Elena frowned, then froze. Scars. His hand was covered with them. Long scars, old scars, burn marks. Damaged skin everywhere, Elena stared. The Duke removed the second glove. More scars, worse scars, both hands destroyed, years of damage. Elena whispered, What happened? The Duke looked at his own hands, quietly for several seconds, then answered, Searching. Elena frowned. What? The Duke slowly flexed his fingers, as if remembering pain. I spent years searching. His voice remained calm, too calm, as if discussing weather. Not suffering, Elena quietly asked. For what? The Duke didn't answer immediately. Instead, he rolled back his sleeves slightly. More scars. Burns continuing upward. Elena looked shocked. How? The Duke interrupted quietly. Do you know what people say about me? Elena hesitated. Yes. They call me monster. She stayed quiet. The Duke looked down. They are correct. Elena frowned. He looked toward her. For years. He paused. I stopped caring who suffered. Silence, he continued, because suffering already existed. His eyes moved toward the scars. So I searched. Elena slowly asked, Searched where? Everywhere. Why? The Duke looked directly at her. For the first time, Elena noticed exhaustion, real exhaustion, not physical, something deeper, years deeper. His voice became quieter. I searched cities, villages, orphanages, ruins, graves. Elena stared. The Duke continued. I searched until nothing remained. Then searched again, she whispered. For who? The Duke looked away briefly, almost painful, then answered, For someone impossible. Elena's heartbeat increased. Silence filled the room. Then she quietly asked, Who? The Duke finally looked directly at her, longer than usual. Almost studying her face again, he whispered, I never expected to find you. Elena froze. What? The Duke slowly stepped closer, not threatening, just closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Elena suddenly remembered everything. The first stare, the portraits, the hidden room, the protection, the obsession, her necklace, everything connected. She swallowed, then quietly asked, "Find who?" the Duke answered. "2 words, my sister." Everything stopped. Completely. Elena stared, unable to process. No, the Duke remained silent. She shook her head. No. Her breathing changed. "That's impossible." Still silence. Elena stepped backward. "You think I'm your sister?" the Duke answered quietly. "I don't know." "What?" "I don't know." Elena looked confused, angry, terrified. "Then why say that?" The Duke looked toward her necklace. Elena instinctively covered it. His voice remained calm. The portraits, the symbol, the timing, the resemblance. He paused. "Nothing makes sense," Elena whispered. "So you think I'm her?" the Duke answered honestly. "I think," he stopped, then quietly continued. "You are connected." Silence. Elena sat down slowly because standing suddenly felt difficult. Her mind raced. This couldn't be true, could it? She remembered childhood. Small memories, broken memories, very little before age 6. Why? Her adoptive parents avoiding questions. Why? The necklace. Always the necklace. Why? She looked up. "If your sister disappeared." The Duke nodded. "How old was she?" he answered. 5. Elena froze. Because she only remembered life beginning around that age. Impossible. She immediately shook her head. "No!" The Duke didn't argue. "That somehow made it worse," she whispered. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" The Duke looked away, then quietly answered. "Because I hoped I was wrong." Silence. Then he added, "And because everyone connected to my family dies." The room became quiet again. Elena looked at the scars, the gloves, the exhaustion, the years. Suddenly, she saw something different. Not monster. Not completely. Someone broken. Someone searching. For years. The Duke quietly moved toward the door. Elena looked up. "Where are you going?" he answered. "To confirm," she frowned. "Confirm what?" The Duke looked toward her one last time, then quietly said, "If I finally found my sister," and left. Elena remained frozen. Because suddenly, the scariest possibility wasn't that the Duke was obsessed. The scariest possibility was that he might be right. After the Duke left, Elena stopped trusting her own memories. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Everything suddenly carried questions. "My sister," those words refused to disappear. Elena sat quietly. Hours passed, maybe longer. Because once a single possibility enters your mind, everything changes. She looked down at the necklace again. The silver had become worn from years of touching it, years of carrying it, years of never questioning it. Now, it terrified her. Because suddenly, nothing about her life looked normal anymore. She tried remembering childhood, real childhood. Not the stories. Not what people told her, actual memories. Very little appeared. A small house, rain against windows, a woman's voice. Someone calling her little bird, then nothing. Large empty spaces, years missing. Elena frowned. Why couldn't she remember? Everyone remembers childhood, don't they? She stood, walked toward the small mirror, stared at herself. Dark hair, the same face from the portraits. The same face from the hidden room. The same face that made powerful people panic. She whispered, "Who am I?" Nobody answered. 3 days later, the Duke returned. This time, he looked different. Not physically, something else. More tired. More serious, as if he carried news. Elena immediately stood. "You found something." The Duke remained quiet, then handed her documents, old papers, worn edges, official seals, dust. Elena looked confused. "What is this?" the Duke answered simply. "Records." She slowly sat, hands shaking slightly. The Duke remained standing, watching, waiting. Elena opened the first document, employment records, names, families, birth information, nothing unusual. Then she saw something. Her name, Elena. She quickly read, then froze. No biological relation confirmed. Her heartbeat increased. She looked up. "What is this?" The Duke answered quietly. "The orphan registration." Elena looked back. "Read again, again, again." The words never changed. "Not biological relation." "Adopted," she whispered. "No." The Duke stayed silent. Elena grabbed another document. Medical registration, foster transfer, town records. Different documents, same answer. Adopted, 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 adopted. Her breathing changed. "No." She shook her head repeatedly. "No." "My mother," the Duke quietly interrupted. "Was not your mother." Silence. Elena slowly placed down the papers. Because suddenly her entire childhood felt unstable, she whispered, "They lied." The Duke quietly answered, "Yes." Tears almost appeared. Not because adoption hurt, because nobody told her, because everyone knew except her, because her entire life suddenly felt borrowed. Elena looked up. "Who were they?" The Duke hesitated, then handed another paper. She opened it. Missing child reports, 20 years old, large official seal. Her eyes moved downward, then stopped. A symbol. The necklace symbol. Her hands immediately shook. She continued reading. Missing noble child. Female, age 5. Last seen wearing family pendant. Pendant. Elena immediately grabbed her necklace, opened it, compared. Same symbol, same design, same everything, she whispered. No! The Duke remained quiet. Elena slowly looked up. This necklace, the Duke answered, belonged to my family. Silence. Her heartbeat became painful. She looked at the dates. Disappearance date. Her estimated age. Everything aligned perfectly. Too perfectly, she continued reading. Description, hair, eyes, birthmarks. Elena immediately checked her wrist. Small birthmark. Exactly where described. She stopped breathing. The Duke quietly asked, Do you understand now? Elena whispered, No. Because she didn't. Not completely. She looked at him. You're saying, the Duke interrupted, I'm saying the evidence exists. Silence. Elena slowly sat back. Everything matched. The necklace, the portraits, the resemblance, the age, the missing child, everything. Everything except one thing. Why would she disappear? Why would someone hide her? She quietly asked. What happened? The Duke remained silent briefly, then produced one final group of papers. These looked different. Much older. More damaged. Elena slowly opened them. Family records, noble names, political alliances, land ownership. She frowned. What is this? The Duke answered. The reason people want you dead. Elena continued reading. Then saw familiar names. Her adoptive family. She froze. No, she read again. The names remained. Her adoptive father, her adoptive mother, their relatives. Why were they inside noble documents? Confused, she continued reading. Then reached another section. Investigations, hidden payments, property transfers, witness statements. Her eyes widened. No, impossible. She read faster. Years earlier, a group of noble families secretly worked together. Political conflict, power struggles, money. Then, one name repeated constantly. Her adoptive family. Elena whispered, What is this? The Duke finally answered, The family's responsible. She slowly looked up. For what? The Duke's voice became quiet. Destroying mine. Everything stopped. Elena stared. The Duke continued. My family's murder, the disappearance, the cover-up, the stolen records. His eyes moved toward the papers. They appear repeatedly. Elena shook her head. No, the Duke didn't argue. That somehow hurt more, she whispered. My parents wouldn't. They were not your parents. Silence. Her breathing became uneven. She looked back at documents, payments, witness reports, false identities, adoption records. Suddenly, one line captured her attention. Child relocated under protective identity. Her identity. Elena felt sick. She whispered, They took me. The Duke stayed quiet. Tears finally appeared, not because of noble blood, not because of missing memories, because the people who raised her never told her, because maybe everything had been a lie. She quietly asked, Did they kill your family? The Duke answered slowly, They helped. Silence. Elena looked at him. Really looked. The scars, the exhaustion, the years. Suddenly, the monster everyone feared made sense. Not acceptable, but understandable, she whispered. They created you. The Duke looked away. Then quietly answered, Yes. Elena looked down. At the papers, at the necklace, at her shaking hands. Because suddenly, the most painful truth wasn't discovering who she was. It was discovering who raised her. The people she called family. The people she trusted, the people who taught her how to survive, may have destroyed everything. And if that truth became public, the kingdom wouldn't simply collapse. It would burn. The Duke quietly asked, What do you want to do? Elena looked toward the window, toward the world she thought she understood, then quietly answered, I want the truth. The Duke looked at her for several seconds, then finally said, Then everything becomes dangerous. Because now, Elena finally understood why powerful people wanted her dead. She wasn't simply a servant girl. She wasn't simply a survivor. She wasn't even simply the girl who resembled the Duke's sister. She was proof, and proof could destroy kingdoms. The truth lasted exactly 2 days. That was all. 2 days before the kingdom exploded, because secrets survive only when powerful people control them. And suddenly, they didn't. It started with whispers. Servants talking quietly, merchants lowering voices, travelers carrying rumors between cities. Then whispers became questions. Questions became accusations. Accusations became panic. People began saying impossible things. The servant girl survived the Duke. She owns the missing family symbol. The Duke found his sister. The dead family may not be completely dead. Every version became worse. By the 3rd day, the entire kingdom talked about Elena, and powerful people became terrified. Inside noble estates, doors closed, meetings happened, letters burned, documents disappeared. Because if Elena truly was connected to the Duke's family, then old crimes could return, and old crimes destroyed powerful families. Elena noticed immediately. The streets changed again. People either avoided her or stared too long. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked frightened. A few looked angry, very angry. She quietly asked Martha, "Why are people acting differently?" Martha looked nervous. "Because people fear change," Elena frowned. "That's all?" Martha hesitated, then quietly answered, "And because some people think you should have stayed missing." That answer stayed with Elena. Later that evening, a royal messenger arrived. Not for Elena, for the Duke. The message spread quickly. Everyone knew. The king had called a royal assembly. All major nobles, all important houses, everybody, which meant one thing: war. Not armies, not yet. Political war. Sometimes worse. The Duke arrived the following morning. Elena immediately noticed something strange. He looked calm. Too calm, she quietly asked, "What happened?" The Duke answered, "They know." Elena sighed. Everyone keeps saying that. The Duke handed her a letter, official seal, royal seal. Elena opened it, then froze. The girl known as Zelena must appear before the court for investigation regarding identity, inheritance claims, and threats against noble stability. She looked up. "What does this mean?" The Duke answered honestly. "They want control." "Of me?" "Yes." "Why?" The Duke looked directly at her. "Because dead people should remain dead." Silence. Elena slowly folded the letter. "What happens if I refuse?" The Duke answered simply. "They come anyway." Fear slowly returned. She quietly asked, "What happens if I go?" The Duke remained silent. That answer frightened her. 2 days later, royal court, the largest hall in the kingdom. Elena had never seen anything like it. Massive pillars, golden walls, hundreds of nobles, servants, guards, power everywhere, and almost every person stared at her. Elena hated it immediately. The Duke walked beside her, silent, as usual. Yet somehow, walking beside him felt safer. That thought surprised her. People whispered as they passed, "That's her! Impossible! She looks exactly like..." Voices stopped when the Duke looked toward them. They quickly looked away. The court session began. A royal official stepped forward. "Today we address matters threatening kingdom stability." Nobody looked at the official. Everyone looked at Elena. The official continued. "The woman known as Elena stands accused of concealing noble identity, provoking political instability, and causing conflict among noble houses." Elena blinked. "What?" The officials ignored her. A noble immediately stood. Older, rich, arrogant. "She should be detained." Another noble stood, questioned another, removed another, dangerous. Voices multiplied. "Arrest her. Investigate her. Separate her from the Duke." Elena looked around. Nobody discussed facts. Nobody discussed truth. Only fear. She quietly whispered, "They want me dead." The Duke quietly answered, "Yes." Another noble stood. This one older, more powerful. He looked directly toward the Duke. "My Duke." Silence filled the room. The man continued. "This situation has become unacceptable." The Duke remained quiet. The noble spoke clearly. "You receive one condition." Everyone became silent. The noble pointed toward Elena. "Give her away." Elena froze. The noble continued. "Remove her from your protection, allow royal custody, and this ends." Silence. The noble finally added, "Refuse." He paused, "and lose everything." Nobody moved. The noble continued, "Your land, your title, your power, everything." The room became painfully quiet. Elena slowly looked toward the Duke. She expected anger. Instead, nothing. The Duke looked completely calm. That frightened her more. The noble repeated, "What is your answer?" Several painful seconds passed. Then the Duke moved, slowly. He walked toward Elena. Everyone watched. He stopped beside her, then did something unexpected. He gently pulled Elena beside him. Standing together, the court looked confused. The Duke finally spoke, his voice calm, cold, controlled. "If the kingdom wants her..." Silence. He looked around the enormous court, at nobles, at officials, at powerful families, then finished. "They fight me first." Everything froze, completely. Nobody expected that. Nobody. One noble immediately stood. "Are you threatening the court?" The Duke answered, "Yes." Gasps filled the room. Another noble shouted, "You would sacrifice everything for her." The Duke looked toward Elena briefly, then answered, "I already sacrificed everything." Silence. The older noble spoke again. "You lose your title." The Duke answered, "Keep it." "You lose your lands." "Take them." "You lose your influence." The Duke finally looked directly toward him, then quietly answered, "I do not care." Nobody spoke, because something strange happened. For the first time, Elena noticed something different. The Duke smiled. Not much, very small, but real. The room noticed too, because suddenly the terrifying realization spread. The monster everyone feared, the cold Duke, the man who never smiled, finally found something worth protecting. Elena looked toward him quietly. Why? The Duke answered without looking away from the crowd. Because I failed once. Silence, then quietly added, I refused twice. The room became chaotic, nobles arguing, officials shouting, guards moving, everything collapsing. But Elena barely noticed, because she suddenly understood something. The Duke spent years searching, years suffering, years becoming something terrifying. Not because he enjoyed being feared, because he lost everything and now he refused to lose again. Outside, as they finally walked away from court, Elena quietly asked, What happens now? The Duke looked toward the massive kingdom surrounding them, then answered honestly, Probably war, Elena sighed. Wonderful. The Duke looked toward her, very slightly smiling again. Yes, she stared, then accidentally laughed. For the first time, so did he, and somewhere behind them, the kingdom realized something terrifying. The beastly Duke was dangerous before. Now he had something to fight for, and that made him far worse. Do you think Elena is truly the Duke's lost sister, or is there a bigger secret hiding behind the necklace? Comment your theory below, and subscribe.